Hi, and welcome to our latest episode of the ENT Review podcast. I'm Laura Dennis, Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at Xoran.
And I'm Rami Alzubi, National Sales Director for ENT Sales.
So today we're continuing our conversation about the patient experience. If you missed our last episode, we talked about how important it is to market your clinic to patients using social media, website. We talked a bit about referring physicians. Check it out if you missed it, because today we're moving on and we are going to talk about workflow. It's a big topic. It can mean a lot of different things, but it's really important what the clinic workflow is, that it's efficient and that it's pleasant, because it all goes back to having a positive patient experience. So Rami, what do you think of when you think of workflow?
I think of physicians being behind schedules, what I think.
Well, there is that.
Countless times I've been able to walk into a clinic and the front desk receptionist or the administrator just talk about how, the doctor is pretty far behind today and he doesn't think that they'll be able to see me, and I'm sure other vendors as well. But to me, if your workflow and how you're kind of seeing patients starts off a little bit more efficiency, like I've seen in some practices, that can only help trickle down, and kind of those small 4 or 5 minute delays don't kind of balloon into 20 and 30 minute delays.
Well, being on time and knowing that this is a doctor's office that is going to be on time is key for the patient experience. I mean, I remember growing up and my PCP was legitimately 2 hours late every time, but that was also because of people like my mother who were getting same day appointments. She was a nurse. She knew how to have that conversation.
She knew what to say.
Yeah. But today, you got to be on time and run it smoothly. And I think it even starts sometimes before you even walk into the door.
I agree. Some of the most efficient practices that I've interacted with either have forms available online that you can fill out early. I've seen many practices moving to kiosks in the waiting room so that everything that they're putting in is all digital right away. So that's two ways that I've seen practices try to kind of streamline that, right from the start, the patient experience.
Well, having those things have less touch. The last thing I want is to fill out 5 pages of paper forms. First of all, we live in a digital age. My handwriting is horrible also, but it can be done electronically and you can do it beforehand, so you don't have to feel like you're spending all those minutes. You already ran late, and now you're afraid now the doctor's going to be late because you're filling out these forms. I think that can really improve the patient experience. Also, when you check in, if there's any confusion, this happened to me just yesterday. They couldn't find my kid's last name, and I saw the office manager hightail it out and was like, no, something must have been entered wrong. Her appointment is today, because I'm thinking I put something weird in my calendar. I'm gonna have to come back. Oh, geez, it's a rigmarole. No. When you have staff who clearly care about the patient and the patient's parent, it reflects back on the clinic. They've got my back.
I agree, and I think technology is a really good way that you can let them feel that interaction. Some practices will text patients now before their appointment. I've seen surveys go out via text after the appointment. I think trying to integrate those things, and kind of like we talked about in the last podcast, not just step one. It's great that you have technology. It's fantastic that you have these capabilities, but are you really diving into them? Do you have the time, quite frankly, to dive into them and what those results are? Are you looking at the feedback? Are you looking at different analytics? So just like everything else that we have, a tool is great, but unless you're trying to improve on what that tool is doing for you or telling you, you might not be taking advantage of it like you should.
That's true. Are you looking at those surveys? Are you finding where there's gaps in the performance? It doesn't have to be punitive for staff either. There can be rewards associated. Hey, if we can get our rating up or we can get some positive feedback, we'll have a pizza lunch on Friday or what have you. And that makes those things fun, and it makes it be something that we're all working together to improve, because of course mistakes happen, delays happen. In fact, I think I see more and more ENTs, when they have their surgery days, it's a surgery day. I think that's probably due to how important the patient experience is when you do have your office days of being able to be on time.
I agree. I think that feedback that you're going to get, how much easier is it to respond to a text that you might get from the clinic or from the physician, even if it's, hey, we might be running late. I don't know if that can be automated, but that would make me feel a lot better than just sitting in the exam room. I've seen practices leave patients in an exam room so they don't feel like they're waiting in the waiting room. Is that the best, kind of way to handle being behind or workflow? There's just so many different ways that you can handle it. But if you're not trying to improve on the feedback that you're getting, I think that, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Agreed. I think a huge portion of what workflow means to me, because nobody asked me, are ancillary services.
I think that practices have recognized that more and more over the years and how they can help. So I definitely agree with that. It's been nice to see kind of more practices moving stuff that is more in their control. So whether it's procedures in the office, whether it's audiology in the office, we talked about this in one of our previous podcasts about big stores trying to get into audiology, but bringing that in and having more control over it, I think can only help the patient experience as long as the practice does it correctly.
There's a huge ancillary service on the table right here that we've got to recognize, which is the MiniCat point of care CT.
Real subtle.
Thank you, yes. No, but that's because getting your CT with your doctor means fewer office visits and fewer appointments, but also I think that also improves treatment compliance. I mean, we've seen the white papers.
I agree. CT is definitely becoming more and more of a linchpin, especially as you're starting to get from first visit, second visit, or even a chronic patient to trying to help them long term. Being able to see, not only is the physician obviously important, but to show that to your patient, I think goes a long way.
When I finally get in to see a specialist, if I can get the answers quickly and get that diagnostic information so that I feel like my specialist is telling me what's going on, it's so powerful. I think it's so powerful for patients to hear when you're face to face with your doctor what's going on in the anatomy.
No, I agree, and we've seen practices respond to just that. Over the last few years, we've had an uptick in physicians who either charge cash, who will give away a service in order to keep that patient retention, who might, write it off as well, just because they want to have that information readily available. All of those things really help your patient feel better and can help really kind of distinguish your practice.
And identify more disease.
Mm-hmm.
We're also seeing, I think another trend that I'm seeing is more and more clinics, they have their main office location. And before they would say, okay, we're going to have all of our patients drive over to the main office. Now they understand that that's still like 3 appointments and you're going to lose patients in that model. And they're replicating having, audiology, but also CT services in each of their satellite offices, so just for that exact reason.
I think that's the exact reason we're also seeing an uptick in VC, PE money being dumped into ENT. Everybody wants to try to replicate what has been successful at one clinic, and those guys obviously think that they can do it across the board. But also, we're seeing now groups get together more and more than they have in the past. We see physician-owned and kind of operated GPOs now starting to become more and more prevalent. We have other physicians working to group up, and not even in the same state anymore. We see all of these guys trying to cross straight lines, and I know that
state lines,
yes,
and straight lines,
yes, all the above. And I know that sometimes the fear is that you're not going to be able to get those insurances to kind of pay the same amount across those straight state lines, but we're seeing it more and more. People are trying to
not
find.
Just staying in the same state.
No, practices who might be in one state are purchasing in other states, and practices who are in a state are expanding to other states. So being able to replicate a successful model, whatever that may be, I think is huge.
And this brings me to our next topic that we're going to talk about on our next episode, which is clinic culture. What are some of the pitfalls that can happen when you cross state lines, open multiple offices, have staff issues? How do you keep that patient experience the same throughout and excellent throughout? So today we talked primarily about workflow as an aspect of the patient experience, and I think workflow is a big issue. Big issue or big fuss, Rami?
I think that as long as you take the outcomes of the workflow and see what becomes of it, good or bad, then it's a big issue. I think if you only look at workflow on the face value of it, it'd probably be a big fuss to me.
Well, there you have it. That's today's ENT Review podcast. I'm Laura Dennis.
I'm Rami Alzubi.
We'll see you on the other side.